All right. So, hi, I'm Mrs. Bennett. I'm the principal at Bradshaw Mountain Middle School. I am here with Mr. Stevens, one of our math teachers. He's taught 7th and 8th grade. And I have Mrs. Tetro, our instructional specialist. At Bradshaw Mountain Middle School, our mission is to become a high reliability school, part of Marzano's framework. And we are dedicated to our standards based grading. And part of that piece and competency based in our journey, that one of those steps is implementing proficiency skills, which allows really clear learning targets. It provides our teachers the ability to create assessments that we're working on, as well as specific feedback for our students to help us down this pathway. So we are really in year 1 where teachers have dabbled with proficiency skills. And we're going to talk to Mr. Stevens about what went well, what we need to work on. And so Ms. Tetra, go ahead and start with a question for Mr. Stevens.
All right, Mr. Stevens, how do proficiency scales affect your classroom instruction?
One of the things that it certainly helps to do is to always kind of have that goal of what students are expected to be able to do on a regular basis. Of they know for whatever the lesson is, whatever the activity is, whatever the unit is, they know what they're going to be expected to be able to do. And with a proficiency scale, it's helpful in kind of showing them the steps of this is kind of where you're at. You need to know these words. You need to know these kind of basic steps that you should have gotten in like 5th grade or 6th grade before you came to me. And then after you either know those steps or you see those steps that you have to get to, and then you can approach your proficiency level of grade level. And so it's nice to, as you're instructing, like, okay, this is going to be a day where we're going to work on partially proficient stuff, go back and review, make sure we hit all the vocab that we need to do. And it helps with instruction, it helps with planning, just to kind of know for you as a teacher, kind of where you need to take them so that way they can be successful in that unit. And then also for the students, so that way they have it literally in front of them. They can look at it whenever you tell them to, whenever they want to. They can look at it and see, for this unit, for this standard, this is what I need to be able to do. And so in terms of the instruction, it helps to just kind of guide that and helps to kind of keep everybody on track.
Good. I mean, having that clear vision of what we need to do. So I think one of the things our teachers really struggle with is I have the proficiency skill. I know what the kids need to do. The kids now at least they know what they need to do, right? We post our daily objectives, but how do you discuss proficiency skills or use these in your classroom? How are students interacting with the proficiency skills? How did you roll it out to them?
I did it a couple ways this past year. To begin the year, I kind of just did kind of a straightforward like read through of here's what the standard is. This is what that means for you. This is what kind of your expectations are in terms of like skills that you need to be able to do. And, some of them are able to pick it up like that. And then I also did with a later unit, I did kind of more of like a student driven type of thing of like, here's your scales. What do you think about them? What questions do you have? And so those are really kind of the two ways that I did it. And there was success from some students in one and not from the other, and then vice versa. So I still I'm working on ways to figure out which way of introducing is best for which unit, because I think it works for some units and may not work for others. In terms of like actually using it on a regular basis, I didn't do a great job of that, to be honest. And so like I would come back to it maybe like once, maybe twice a week, just to like remember when we talked about this, remember when we talked about your expectations of what you need to be able to do. Your quiz or your assessment is in 2 weeks. How do you feel about this? And that's one of the things that I need to focus on next year, is being more kind of more proactive and more intentional in bringing that into the classroom every day, not just at the beginning of the unit and then at the end of the unit.
So what do you think that would look like after this year? Like if you're going to be more intentional, what do you envision that could look like next year?
I envision that to be kind of like a daily check-in when, when students are coming in, rather than necessarily having like a bell work problem, maybe something like that, but also just kind of a check-in of like, what did we do yesterday? Where does that where does that put us on your proficiency scale? What does that put us in terms of the timeline of when you need to have this kind of mastered, and just kind of having them check back in with me, having them check back in with themselves on what we're continuing to talk about, what we are continuing to practice in. And so that way they're always kind of reminded each and every day of what our goal is here, what the plan is for class, and it's not always, and so that way there's no lack of clarity. That way they always know kind of what to expect for each day. And so that's kind of my plan for going into this year is to just take 2 minutes and look at your proficiency scale. What have we done? Where do you think we're going?
Okay.
What do you think that's going to look like?
How do you how are you using proficiency skills? Like how are those linked to assessments in your classroom? How are those tied together?
So far they've been kind of an informal link. When creating the assessments, I'm looking at what did I put for their I can statements of what they need to be able to do, and then kind of just running a question through that and saying like, does this determine whether they can do this and this and this? And if the question doesn't, then don't use that. And then kind of I also tried a couple of different ways of assessments this past year. I did kind of like a partially proficient assessment where they had to see, can you meet all of the I can statements in partially proficient before I let them take the proficiency assessment. And then I also gave them just kind of a whole scale assessment as well. And some of it was good, some of it wasn't. So just being more intentional this year and kind of like what type of question, giving them a question or an equation to solve that they need to be able to do on an assessment on their own at a certain time. And so not just having them be like, you need to be able to solve an equation that has one variable and has two operations. That's pretty vague. Like giving them a specific equation saying, you need to be able to solve this from start to finish on your own.
Good. So with those assessments in your classroom, how has doing proficiency skills been able to allow you to give feedback? What kind of feedback? How has it impacted your feedback to kids?
The feedback has been kind of it's been good for us as teachers and kind of difficult because the constant feedback is something that they always kind of need. They need regular feedback and they need to know where they stand kind of at every point. And when you have 80 to 100 kids, that gets difficult to stay on top of all the time. But giving the feedback is fairly easy because you can just kind of look and see, based on their answer, like, do they have it or do they not? Have they met the standard? Have they not met the standard? Where do they fall? Are they way off? Are they close? And that helps because they have the framework of what they need to be able to do in front of them before they even take the assessment or before they even take the assignment or whatever. They know like what that's going to be. Am I proficient? Did I do what I was supposed to do? Am I there? Or am I partially proficient? Am I almost there? Am I minimally proficient? Or do I have a long way to go? And so kind of all being on the same page with all of the classes and having that same type of vocabulary in all the kids' heads, it makes it easy to give that feedback and it makes it faster. Just it's give and take. You have easier to give feedback, but then it's harder because you just have to do more of it.
You realize they're all like where they each are at versus just assigning points and you get it or you don't get it, right? Now I know that you specifically do not get this piece versus you got an 8 out of 10. You have a 5 out of 10.
Right.
Very good. So I'm going to finish up because really you answered a lot of questions in your responses that were embedded in there. So unless Ashley has another question.
I have one question for you. I know this year you tried to do a personalized learning unit with your students, giving them proficiency skills and letting them work at their own pace on the I can statements and testing when they signed up to test and all that. How did that go? What would you change? What successes did you get from that? Did you get more buy-in from kids that way? What does that look like?
Sure. It was good and there was bad. I mean, with all things, it was good in the terms of like they kind of saw the whole path that they needed to travel, and so for some kids, they saw that as like, oh, okay, I can do that. And then other kids, it was just way too much for them, and they realize, oh no, I can't do any of that right off the bat. And trying to explain that like it's not, you're not gonna be able to do all of it right now. And so the kids who were easier to get motivated, they wanted to get through it as fast as they can. They wanted to do as much of it that they can. And they always wanted that feedback. You know, for those kids, it was really good for them. And then for the other kids who probably would have struggled through it anyway, no matter what type of unit whether it was personalized or not. Kind of giving all of them that information right off the bat probably scared a lot of them and made a lot of them not want to try. So that was kind of the big picture look. And then the day to day, it was nice to know where I needed to take them, but also kind of like, well, I'm giving them these questions here to answer. Do I want to make that as part of the assignment? Or do I want to give them something else? And just kind of the day to day was a little murky to kind of figure out. And it's just kind of figure out, what do they need? What do they need as a class? What do they need individually? Things like that. So since they were all over the place, so it was good and bad. I'm going to try it again with a unit next year. Haven't decided which one, but I'm going to try it again.
It sounds like you really couldn't try that level of that personalized learning without the proficiency skills in place. Yeah. Okay. I think that's kind of where the power of those learning targets, but so many steps and things that we can all learn and share together. Mm-hmm. So thank you for taking your time today to share with us. I know there's a lot to learn, and it sounds like you've already done a lot of reflection on some changes to make next year. Yeah. And I look forward to having more of our teachers continually utilize proficiency skills on our campus where kids become more comfortable using them and see the value in taking ownership of their own learning. This is where I'm at, and this is where I need to go. This is what I need to work on. A lot of power in that as we transform them, creates that growth mindset for our students. So thank you for your time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Mm-hmm.